Bhante, I'm going to prepare for it, so you have to unmute yourself. Okay, Bhante?
Am I muted now?
No, not at the moment. You may be. You will be. Okay. There we go. Bhante, whenever you're ready. Okay.
Okay, friends, I'd like to welcome you all for this Sunday afternoon talk and meditation. And as normally, for those who like, we can recite the Namo Tassa and the three refuges. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. So again, friends, welcome to this Dhamma talk and meditation. And today is the, I don't know if it's exactly the full moon day, but it's the Poya day, the day most of the Buddhists are observing the full moon Uposatha day. It's because Sunday is, even if the full moon was on a Friday or a Monday or Tuesday, usually most centers observe it on the Sunday. Now, I'm going to be putting up on the shared screen shortly the sort of topic that we're going to be covering today. And so last week, in the talk last week, I went over the 8 insight knowledges. And this is basically the advanced stages of Vipassana meditation. In the beginning, people practicing mindfulness and Vipassana, a lot of it is what we would call a very elementary levels. That means developing some basic mindfulness and some insights. But until one has weakened the 5 hindrances to a good degree, not maybe totally, and has developed that level of the momentary concentration, where basically the awareness, the mindfulness is able to be aware from moment to moment, the major types of stimulations or sensations and thoughts that are coming and going through the mind and body, and starting to understand them as, they're in their impermanent nature. And so until that is developed to a certain degree, then that's still considered a very elementary level of mindfulness or vipassana. So, but when that concentration is developed more, and the noticing becomes very quick and keen, how different things are just arising and vanishing through the body and the mind, then those 8 insight knowledges, then that path through the insight knowledge is developed. So the knowledge of arising and vanishing. So this is where you're able to see the mind is able to see very quickly how different body sensations, even sounds and thoughts are just arise, last a moment and vanish without the mind clinging on to them. Is able to notice more and more sensory stimulations coming and going, almost simultaneously, or in a very short stretch of time, within even 5 seconds, you could very clearly observe, 20 or 30 or more different sense stimulations coming and going. So that's the level of arising and vanishing, really, that really picks up. And then that builds up speed until you focus. It seems like they're just vanishing. They hardly even last in the mind more than a millisecond, and you just see them like a shooting star vanishing through awareness, because the mind is no longer holding on to them or reacting. And then you develop the knowledge of the terror. That means seeing the danger of the attachment, because when the mind tries to cling on to any of these sense stimulations with attachment or aversion, then immediately you see the agitation or suffering arise within the mind. And so you're seeing the attachment to the hindrances as this knowledge of the terror, but we saw that it's not really terror. It's that understanding that if you cling to these things, you get burned, or you get some kind of distress and suffering if you cling with ignorance and strong attachment. And then that terror kind of relaxes down into the knowledge of danger, and now they no longer appear like terror, but you just see the danger in being attached to them, because you're starting to experience the happiness of not being attached to them. And so then it goes through you become dispassionate towards reacting even to painful feelings, and even thoughts. You're no longer reacting to them, and they just vanish out of the mind. So this dispassion arises. It means non-attachment. And then the desire to be free from that attachment and ignorance and attachment that's caused you suffering for so long, developing that desire for deliverance. And then you review all of that. By this time, the mind has become very peaceful and very concentrated. And then you go back and review everything you've learned about the 5 aggregates, the 6 senses, about paticca samuppada, to totally dispel any lingering, perhaps, doubts. And then finally, the mind reaches the equanimity of formations stage. And that is the 8th, or the culmination of cultivating the insight. And if one is able to maintain that equanimity and wisdom for long enough, then the mind will go through the next two levels or stages of conformity and change of lineage. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I want to mention now at this point, the 10 fetters and the hindrances. I want to talk about their co-functions or their how they work together. So the 10 fetters, as you can see down here. The first one, personality belief. And the fetters are like the branches, or excuse me, the fetters are like roots of a tree, in the soil underneath. They're hidden under the soil. So we don't see the roots of trees normally, except sometimes you might see them on a surface part of one. And the personality belief or the ego, it means clinging to the sense of I and me, is like the tap root that goes down the deepest into the soil. And then there's the clinging to rites and rituals. That is the idea that, and again, you have to understand that when the Buddha was talking about these things, he was talking within the culture of the time, especially of the Vedic culture, where rites and rituals about attaining enlightenment were quite prevalent, or external rites and rituals that people believed that would purify their mind from ignorance and somehow liberate their mind, such as the most famous one is bathing in the Ganges River. So some Hindus might believe that just bathing in the Ganges River by itself would be enough to cleanse or wash away the sins or bad karma of many lifetimes. Or circumambulating Mount Kailash, which is a popular example, or other mountains, thinking that if you walk around a certain holy mountain, or enough times that also would guarantee you, rebirth in heaven realms, or attaining liberation also. So the Buddha saw that if you cling to these and don't actually meditate, just thinking by doing that alone that's going to purify your mind, then that's considered a clinging to a rites and a ritual. Now you might do some of these rites and rituals, but you still might meditate and to develop wisdom. But thinking that they alone are going to bring enlightenment from the Buddhist point of view, that was a fetter that kept the mind bound to the wheel of samsara. Now again, visualize the fetters like a chains, being bound up by chains, your wrists and arms and legs all bound up by chains. So these 10 fetters are the chains of the mind that keep the mind caught in the web of samsaric conditioning and creating more and more intricate bonds of karmic conditioning. So, and then the third fetter is a skeptical doubt. I've mentioned these before because these are part of the hindrances also. And so some of these fetters are also hindrances, like doubt. So doubt we covered before as being a hindrance, but it's also a fetter. Now the difference between the fetters and the hindrances is the hindrances are like branches of a tree. Now you can prune a branch off of a tree, but you know, when it's given enough light and water, the branch can grow back, because it's the roots that are getting nourished, and it's the roots that provide the, you know, send the life force up to produce more branches and so on. So that's why the hindrances can be overcome temporarily. You know, when you meditate and you apply the right efforts, you can overcome the hindrance of sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness, worry, and doubts. But because the fetters are still there, then they come up again. Only when you maintain a high level of concentration, these hindrances remain suppressed. So that's the difference between the fetters and the hindrances. And that's why only the fetters are uprooted through the practice of the insight meditation, because the fetters are down in the unconscious mind. So it's only insight meditation and mindfulness and insight that penetrates down through the layers of the unconscious to uproot the ignorance. So anyway, the fourth and fifth fetters are sense desire and ill will. So these are also hindrances, and they can be overcome temporarily in meditation, but you know, they keep coming up again because of the fetters. And then, so the first five fetters are called the lower fetters, or the gross fetters. And the next five are more subtle. So the sixth one says desire for fine form. Now, in meditation, you might, you know, let's say if you attain jhana, you might have overcome temporarily desire for some of the external sense objects. But you might have attachment to that piti and sukha, the pleasure that's coming out of the piti, out of the concentration, you know, those kind of blissful sensations, or the sense of, you know, lightness and so on, or inner light that you can experience while practicing meditation. So there's a subtle desire for even those things. People get attached to, you know, the inner light that they might experience, or again, these sensations of happiness and bliss that you can experience. So that's called a subtle fetter, desire for the fine form. And the desire for the formless, even when the mind attains the formless jhanas, then there can be subtle attachment to that. And also it applies to the attachment, the desire to be reborn in some of these other realms, like after death, people hope to be reborn in some Deva Loka or some Brahma realm. So that's a, you know, a subtle clinging, but it's still a, you know, it's a subtler fetter. And then there's the subtle pride, and then restlessness and ignorance. So, you know, in the fetter number one, the personality belief, that is, it's the belief in an ego. And as we'll see shortly, that with the first stage of enlightenment into the stream, you see through the illusion of the ego. Because for most people, the sense of self appears to be very real, but basically it's, you know, like a mental bubble created within the mind, or a shadow of the consciousness, the sense of I am the one that's hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, thinking, doing this, doing that. So, but it's the belief in the self. So, but the subtler sense of I still exists within the consciousness. So you no longer believe in the self, but yet the mind still is holding on and has this sense of I in the back of the consciousness. And then there's subtle restlessness, and then subtle ignorance applies to, until one has reached the final stage of liberation. Then there's ignorance, still a subtle form of ignorance, and it's connected with the subtle pride, with the ego. Anyway, so those basically are the 10 fetters. Now, these are overcome in gradual stages for most people. Now, some people with very strong concentration and with the accumulation of past maturity of their spiritual faculties and so on may go through all of these stages pretty quickly. But anyway, so those 10 fetters are there. Now let's go back again to the insight knowledges and the equanimity of formations. So I mentioned last week, or today also, that if you can remain in that state of equanimity, that means the mind is no longer going out to any of the sensory impingements or the 5 aggregates. It's become deeply grounded and centered in the pure awareness, the present moment, pure awareness without any hankering to go out, and has reached that stillness. And if you're able to maintain that long enough, then what arises next, or the mind goes through what is called conformity knowledge. Now, this might be a little bit difficult for some of you to understand. I know it may sound intellectual, but it's an actual experience of the consciousness that you can and will experience when you reach those levels of insight. That means conformity knowledge. It conforms to the previous insights gained about the cessation of suffering, and that nibbana is the ultimate peace and freedom. You're almost so convinced of that now that the mind starts conforming with that. So it doesn't go out to get attached to any of the 6 sense objects or the 5 aggregates. And it's experiencing that state of deep state of peace and mental freedom that's experienced in that 4th jhanic level of equanimity. So it's the mind, conforms to the insights that you've gained. That means it's letting go of the ego, letting go of the sense of I. It starts fading away more and more, like an Alka-Seltzer tablet dissolving in water, or any fizzy tablet. When you first put it in there, you can still see the round tablet and the fizzing bubbles, right? But then as it keeps on fizzing, the tablet the core of the tablet gets smaller and smaller until finally it totally vanishes. So that's what happens in the state of conformity knowledge, that transformation, that the mind is conforming with the knowledge that the ego is an illusion. And it's actually conforming to it. This is no longer intellectual. This is beyond the intellectual now. It's the actual consciousness itself going through a metamorphosis due to the prolonged, sustained attention in that level of equanimity. And so there's some interesting little similes that are given to this conformity knowledge. and also the next knowledge, the change of lineage. So the conformity knowledge, it leads to the insight leading to emergence. That means the consciousness is emerging from ego-bound consciousness to pure, unbounded awareness. And so that's why it's called emergence. It's like a caterpillar emerging from a cocoon, having been a caterpillar walking on ground. Now it's emerging with wings and can fly. But anyway, so, and then the change of lineage, that refers to the mind is changing its status from mundane consciousness to supramundane consciousness, or it's changing the lineage from a worldling to an Arya Pugala, or a noble person, that a person of wisdom. So changing the ignorant, the lineage from an ignorant person to a person of wisdom, starting with the first level of the entering the stream, the wisdom of entering the stream, and then there's 3 others that we'll get to. So, and then that change of lineage results in the actual attainment of the path, like reaching the path of stream entry. And so this first simile, it's like a man had come to a river and he's standing on one bank and he sees on the other side of the river, very calm and peaceful on the other side of the river. Maybe on this side of the bank, there's lots of disturbances and noises and people, and he wants to get to the other side. And he sees a rope hanging on a branch, that's overhanging the river. There's a rope hanging down. So the man, wishing to get to the other bank, he grabs a hold of the rope. And then he kind of, backs up a little bit and runs, and then releases his feet from this bank, and it starts swinging over the river. That's the conformity knowledge. That's the mind conforming to the knowledge of no self or emptiness. As the man swings out over the river, is no longer on the bank, on the near bank. So he's left, and he's making that transition. And it emerges over the other bank. And then he's got to let go of the rope. That's changing the lineage, letting go of the rope. And then it drops to the land on the other side, standing on the path, on the ground of the other side. That's like path knowledge. That's called path knowledge. So if you can imagine that, it takes a little bit of imagination to imagine that, but it's a nice little simile. But some people don't want to let go. They're afraid to do that, or they don't want to let go of the rope. Or if you lose your grip, you might fall in the river, in the middle of the river. So you have to hold on. That conformity knowledge has to be strong enough, hold on long enough to reach over the other bank. And then it naturally lets go and experiences that glimpse of nibbana when the feet hit the ground. And that destroys the 3 fetters. That first path, what is called path knowledge, or Sotapanna path knowledge. It destroys the first of the 3 fetters. And let's go to this next simile, because these similes are, they kind of illustrative about the same process. So it seems that there was a bat, a fruit bat. It was, landed on a fruit tree with the idea that it was going to eat some fruit. And so it's like our mind lands on the 5 aggregates, form, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, and the six senses, looking around for some pleasure, trying to get some pleasurable sensation or satisfaction from the five aggregates. And so the bat looks around for fruit. So that's like the meditator's mind that's seeing and investigating anicca, dukkha, and anatta with concentrated mindfulness. So the mind is looking around. Where's the happiness in form? Where's the happiness in feeling, perception, volition, consciousness? Where's the happiness in form, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch? And not seeing any, because of the previous insight knowledges that they've cultivated, they don't see any lasting pleasure. Okay, we admit there may be some temporary pleasure, but we're talking about ultimate and lasting pleasure. So the mind not finding any pleasure, entertainment in being attached to the five aggregates, it turns away from that. And it's like the bat not finding any fruit to eat. He gets disgusted with the tree and said, this tree is barren. There's nothing here. There's no fruit here. And so it runs up a straight branch to the top of the tree and pokes its head out and sees the clear sky overhead. That's like the conformity knowledge, the mind leaving the five aggregates and going upwards, as it were, but basically it means the mind, that last little fizzy tablet of the dissolving in the water, is conforming to the happiness of no self, and it goes up to the top of the tree. The bat goes up to the top of the tree and flies off of that tree. That's the change of lineage. The bat flying off of the tree, and then he alights on another tree. That is the path knowledge. The bat landing on another tree is the path knowledge. And there he finds the supramundane path, and there he finds the fruit is sweet. So he enjoys eating the fruit, and that is like the fruition. So landing on the ground, landing on the other tree, or landing on the other bank is the path knowledge, but then steadying your balance and then actually enjoying the sights and sounds and smells of the other side, or eating the fruit of ultimate peace and happiness and insight is the fruition. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So anyway, I want to go back up here now to the 10 fetters and the 4 stages. So we already talked about the first path of entering the stream. Those first 3 fetters are destroyed or eliminated. So it's like the roots of those being pulled out. And it is said that person is called a sotapanna, one who has entered the stream. And that's the first stage of the supramundane path, or the first stage of liberation or enlightenment. And it is said that attaining the stage of the sotapanna, destroying those 3 fetters, is probably the hardest part of Dhamma practice, because those roots are so deep. But it's said by attaining the stage of the sotapanna that it wipes out a big chunk of one's past karma, you might say. And that a sotapanna, even if they were very negligent, as we read in the Satipatthana Sutta last week about the Buddha's promise, that if a sotapanna is very negligent, he might have up to 7 more lifetimes of rebirth in samsara before all that previous karma and ignorance and attachments was wiped out. But of course, that could happen even in one lifetime. It could even happen in one hour of meditation, if one had, mature spiritual faculties and so on. But let's just follow this kind of explanation out. So that's why the Buddha praised that, a Dhamma practitioner should really strive to at least attain that first stage of enlightenment before death. Because if you don't attain entering the stream, the mind could go on being born over and over and over again in samsara for hundreds or even thousands of lifetimes, as our minds already have been up to this point. So the lifetimes, having only 7 lifetimes to go in samsara is, like a drop in the bucket compared to what you might have to go through if you didn't kind of reach that level and overcoming those 3 fetters. So that's how much the Buddha, encouraged people to strive to try to, reach that level before death. And again, we don't know when death will come. And that's why the, contemplation of death and the sense of urgency, because, you could think you're going to live another 10 or 20 years, as some people have thought, and, getting coronavirus, they were dead within a week or 2 weeks. Now almost 500,000 people, it seems, or quite a lot of people, maybe not that many, but anyways, some hundreds of thousands of people, right? So that's the first stage of the enlightenment, with overcoming the 3 fetters. But then one still has sense, desire, and ill will. So a lot of people misunderstand the Sotapanna, and they think a Sotapanna is almost an arhat. Certainly not. And the Sotapanna still has sense, desire, and ill will. They still could have sexual desire and anger and so on, but it wouldn't cause them to break any of the major precepts that would cause them rebirth in the lower realms. And that's also, there's factors of the stream winning. So with each of these levels, when a person enters the stream, there's these factors of stream winning. That means also the doubts have been overcome, because the doubt was about the ego. And the doubt was about, was there really something called liberation? A lot of people have doubts, oh, no, that doesn't exist, just whatever. So, but that's overcome because you've directly experienced that liberating state of the mind. So, and you realize that you realized how you got there, that it wasn't through walking around a mountain 1,000 times or bathing in holy water that purified your mind from the defilements. It was by the hard work of, developing sila, samadhi, and panya, the Eightfold Path, and so on, the spiritual life, at least for most people. So anyway, the factors of stream winning are total unshakable faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and that no one could ever really overturn your faith in the Dhamma. And the belief in the ego is overcome. So the personality belief is overcome. But again, it's the intellectual belief, but it's still, you might still have the sense of I there in your mind, or you will have it, but it won't be as strong as before. And so those 3 fetters are overcome, and it's said that and one would wouldn't break the major precepts to cause rebirth in the lower realm. So it is said that when one attains the state of entering the stream, the mind cannot be reborn in the lower realms of, in the animal realm or the hungry ghost realms or even any of the realms of the hells. So the door has been sealed to the lower forms of rebirth by the attainment of the Sotapanna. So the person would be reborn only as a human being, or perhaps in Deva realms, or if they've developed their meditation to a high degree, their concentration, they could be reborn in a formless realm, but by and large, they would probably come back as a human being to continue their path. Anyway, so those, unshakable faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and overcoming those three fetters, the personality, belief, and having the, a very good high degree of sila, that you wouldn't really break any of the major precepts that would cause you any intense kind of suffering or prolong your existence in the samsara. But one still can make karma, of course, but it will be much weaker than before because of that level of wisdom. So, because a lot of people have asked, they're in doubts about, they think they might have attained the, stream entry, or they still have some doubts. Well, if you're in doubts, that means you probably have not. But, because it's a very powerful experience. And it's like this, an analogy, I'll give it an analogy. Let's say somebody was carrying bags of concrete, 2 bags of concrete on each shoulder. Let's say for Europeans or Brazilians, 20-kilo bags, or for American, 50 bags of concrete, 2 on each shoulder. It would be very heavy. That's the burden of ordinary samsaric mind, of the worldling that's burdened with the sufferings and worries of the samsara. And then let's say all of a sudden a person came and pushed one of those bags, 50-pound bags of concrete, off the shoulder. Now it'd still feel heavy, but it would feel lighter too. You'd sense wow, it's a little bit lighter now. So that's a mental thing. That's not a physical lightness. It's a mental lightness. The mind feels lighter because it's been freed from the personality belief and the doubts, and the other, having a more purified level of behavior. And so it's free from a lot of that guilt, worry, remorse, and fear of, habitually breaking precepts, for example. So that's a kind of a lightness of mind that you would experience too. So that's the way you can see for yourself. And it lasts. It doesn't just last, while you're in meditation. It lasts while you're out of meditation too. That's the criterion of enjoying the fruit. That's why it's called supramundane. It's beyond impermanence. It stays as this constant level of more purified awareness, and the freedom from those karmic, certain karmic entanglements. So then a person goes on meditating again, still basically the same kind of meditation, but you review in your mind, you understand what defilements are still left in your mind. A certain amount of greed and hatred might have been overcome, but you see how there's still more. And you have the still those last 7 remaining fetters of sense, desire, ill will, pride, still some ego, the ego is there, and ignorance. So you go on meditating, practicing Vipassana, cultivating again the insight knowledges over and over again, practicing the Satipatthana meditation, or whatever forms of meditation that got you to realize Sotapanna. That means you're on the right track. And you keep on practicing. It could be days, months, years, whatever. But at some point, you reach that level again, where you can't automatically gain that state of, deep state of meditation all the time, especially as a Sotapanna. But you can get to that stage of equanimity quite easily. But anyway, at some point you go through those conformity knowledge, emergence, change of lineage, to reach the path of the once returner. And where it weakens, let's say 90%, it weakens the accumulated residual desire, sense desire, and ill will. It weakens that. I mean, there's no exact number given, but let's arbitrarily, let's say 90%. So your buttons would really have to be strongly pushed to have any desire for any of the sensory stimulations or ill will. So that's why it's called once. That means, and it's called once returning, because that's enough karma. That residual desire and aversion is desire and aversion connected with the worldly life. So that's why it's called once returning. That's enough karma to get the mind reborn one more time to the human realm in order to finish it off. If you don't go on and finish it off in that lifetime itself. So that's why it's called once returning. But they still, once returners still have, again, that small amount of desire and aversion. And what are called the higher fetters. And so you go on practicing again and again until at some point, maybe again, it could be in that, could even be in the same meditation period, or the next day or the next week or the next month, depending on how much you practice, the maturity of your sense faculties, your spiritual powers. And you would attain the third stage of called non-returning. And that's where the last residual amounts of sense desire and ill will are totally eliminated or destroyed. And so it's called never returning, because a person who becomes a never returner, they won't return to the material world for rebirth. But they're born in some heaven realms that don't have any sensory kind of stimulation there. I mean, it's a difficult concept to put your head around. So I know it might sound, a little bit hard to understand. But anyway, it means that because earth, to be born on the earth means there has to be desire and attachment to the sensory world. But because that's been overcome, the mind won't be attracted to the earth anymore, and it's attained these very fine, higher realms where there's only the fine form or the formless, where it's difficult to really explain what they are. And so the once returner, the never returner is born into one of these pure abodes called a pure abode. And they still have the last 5 higher fetters, because that desire for fine form was what got them to be born in these pure abodes, the fine form. And they have attained the full enlightenment directly from there without being born on the earth again. And those last 5 higher fetters are realized. But probably, most people, whether you get born in those really higher realms of the non-returner, that would probably depend on whether you were able to attain and master the stages of jhana also. at the same time as you're practicing insight. But one could easily, that's when you're reborn again as this, in that, as a once returner, then probably if you're continuing your practice, which you would, then you could attain that final stage of the Arhat, in that lifetime itself. So that's kind of just how those 10 fetters are connected with the 4 stages of enlightenment. So they're eliminated little by little, just like that analogy of the Alka-Seltzer tablet dropped in water. When the tablet is hard, and you take it out of the bottle, then it's hard, like our ordinary mind that's strongly clinging to its greed, hatred, and delusion, and the hard shell of the ego. But then you put it into the water of wisdom. Throwing it into the water is like putting it into the meditating mind with mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, and it starts to permeate the tablet and start loosening up those that hardness of the tablet, and these fetters and hindrances start fizzing away gradually, as I mentioned before, until finally it's the ego is finally let go of. So anyway, those intermediate stages of conformity knowledge and change of lineage, this is the actual transformation of the consciousness from the mundane to the supramundane experiences. So, because when you've gone through the 8 insight knowledges, that is, that's the work actually. The work is getting to that stage of equanimity, where the mind has developed that stage of equanimity, either through concentration or through the practice of the 7 factors of enlightenment, developing the 7 factors of enlightenment that we talked about last week. And then it's just a matter of holding that state of equanimity and wisdom long enough for this conformity knowledge, because the bat could stay on the fruit tree, looking around, still hoping that it's going to find some hidden fruit somewhere. So it might stay in the tree a little longer, but at some point, the bat realizes it's futile and flees the tree. That means the ego leaves its last clinging to the aggregates. And there's another simile also given of a land-finding crow. Actually, here now I've put these, which fetters are eliminated by these 4 stages are up on the shared screen, you can see. But so there was when the sailors in the old days, the sailing ships, they used to take like whether it's a pigeon or a crow, anyway, they call it a land-finding crow. And they're out in the ocean and they're trying to figure out where is the land. So they let the crow go, fly away. So the crow flies away. If it sees land, it doesn't come back. But if it sees land and doesn't come back, the sailor knows, that's the land, the crow had found the land. And so it goes in that direction the crow was flying. So that's similar to the mind. When it flies off of the ship, that conformity knowledge, if it doesn't see nibbana as a state of peace, it's like the person not letting go of the rope. And he swings back to the near bank rather than continuing to go over the other bank. Instead of letting go of the rope and jumping to the ground, he swings back over to the near bank again, because that change of lineage knowledge wasn't mature enough. So anyway, these are just interesting examples, little similes, how the Buddha or the other ancient meditation masters came up with these very nice similes to show this way the mind transforms toward liberation. I mean, who does that these days, you know? I mean, even all the modern high psychologists, they can't tell us these kind of things. But it only took, you know, meditation masters to be able to really deeply see that whole process of how the mind is bound to the senses in creating its illusions, and more especially the way to release it. You know, a lot of people might in other, you know, religions or whatever talk about liberations and so on, but you know, very few of them give the detailed kind of mechanical instructions on, like these insight knowledges of developing Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the Eightfold Path. It's a very clear and logical path to that level of purification. So, so basically that's what I wanted to share with you today, because you know, a lot of you might say, well, I'm never going to get to these levels and so on, but you know, you never know. I mean, I've talked to people, and people, you know, who have been practicing meditation, Vipassana, you know, they might be, you know, ready or to have these kind of experiences. But, you know, if you don't hear about it, then you know, you may not understand what's happening. So at least having, this is part of the intellectual wisdom again. So, you know, understanding this, what I've just been talking about is, you know, intellectual wisdom. But as you meditate, you develop your concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom, you start getting little glimpses of how this process works, until finally the mind comes to that level of letting go of its clinging to the aggregates and so on, as actual mental experience. And then the mind goes through this conformity knowledge, conformity transformation, and change of lineage to experience those stages of liberation. So the stages of liberation, basically, that means it's the freedom from the fetters. So the freedom of a once returner is much higher than the freedom of a sotapanna, because the sotapanna still had desire and aversion. Now the once returner is attenuated desire and aversion for 90%, let's say. So his experience of freedom is greater, and of the weakening of the ego. The once returner even experiences a greater degree of freedom than the sotapanna. And then the arahant experiences the greatest degree of freedom, even from the subtle hindrances. So, you know, and so, you know, it's just that to have a kind of just an understanding about, you know, how the process of the mind works, and especially the fetters and the hindrances, how the fetters are deep. And so it takes a deep method. It takes a very powerful method to go down to get the roots out. So that's why in other talks I've talked about the Vipassana meditation as being the way to, we're tricking the mind out of ourself, like going through all these 8 insight knowledges of seeing things rising and vanishing, then dissolving, then seeing them as a terror, then danger, then dispassion, desire for deliverance. These are ways of tricking the mind out of itself, because the mind is holding on very tightly. Mara is holding on very tightly. So it takes a very strong medicine. This is the medicine of wisdom that permeates deep into the unconscious mind more than any other. And again, this is the direct path that directly penetrates in rather than going around in circles. This process of insight, it penetrates deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, to the very core. So anyway, we'll be probably talking more about these things in some of the next talks of Sutta study too. And now, having said that much, I would like to see if there's any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing this now, and then take a look. Looks like there may not be any questions even. Or a couple questions. Does conformity knowledge require a jhana state? Well, I'd rather not call it a jhana state because people get confused of what is a jhana, what isn't a jhana, and they think jhana is some absorbed state of concentration. So, but it requires jhanic level concentration. That means the 5 hindrances have to be suppressed. So, you can suppress them through the practice of mindfulness and concentration that I've already talked about before, without specifically practicing to attain a jhana. That means while practicing, developing the 7 factors of enlightenment, and through the practice of the momentary concentration, gradually when the 5 hindrances get suppressed, that is jhanic level concentration. Whether you call it a jhana or not, I don't like to call it jhana. Just call it, suppression of the 5 hindrances. That's more clear. Because you know what the hindrances are and you know when they've been suppressed. It's a radical experience, a difference. So anyway, yes, to that state of equanimity, that's the 4th, that's equivalent to the level of equanimity you get in the 3rd and 4th jhana. But I'm not going to call it jhana, but let's call it jhanic level of concentration, meaning the hindrances have been suppressed. And the longer you can keep them suppressed by staying in that state, you have to stay in that state longer. That equanimity might have to stay in that state, 1 or 2 hours before finally that process of changing from equanimity to conformity knowledge arises. So that's why if one has attained jhanas before and not got stuck in them, but used that level of calmness and clarity to develop the insight, then yes, that can be done. And another question, at what stage will the hindrances do not affect the practitioner anymore? Only with the stage of the arhat. Because I told you, the hindrances are dependent on the fetters. And even the non-returner still has fetters. He has the fetter of mana, the fetter of restlessness, and the fetter of go back and check the list, and the fetter of ignorance. So because of that, hindrances can still arise, but certainly they won't be as strong as before. But they can still arise. So only with the stage of go back and check that list that compares each stage with the fetters that have been overcome, and then you will understand that the hindrances connected with those fetters can still arise as long as the fetters are still there. What is the significance of not being able to let go of the swinging rope? Is it negative? Does one get stuck? Well, the fact that you actually swung out over the river itself is a very positive state. That means because you've already reached the state of equanimity, which is a very high state of meditation. So it's not negative, but the significance is that the wisdom was not totally mature. There's still some lingering doubt there. Until that last little thread, thin thread of doubt is overcome, then you won't let go of the rope and you swing back. So that's the significance of it. It's, I wouldn't say it's negative, it's just, it's not, the wisdom is not mature enough. And so one is afraid to let go. It's like learning to swim. You know, when a young child learns to swim in a swimming pool, and then he's holding on to the side of the pool with both hands and, you know, holding tightly, and the mother instructor is trying to say, okay, now take one hand off and just try to float there with one hand on the bank. And then finally the instructor says, you know, take your other hand off. And, you know, the person's still hesitating, right? He has that little bit of fear of letting go of the ego, let go of that last remnant of me, I, me, and mine, right? So it's because you're not totally convinced yet, that afraid that you still have the fear of, you know, sinking or drowning. So that's the significance, is that it means the wisdom faculty is not 100% mature yet. I don't see a fetter that causes the hindrance of sloth and torpor. Again, some of these hindrances are not directly related to the fetters, but basically sloth and torpor is a condition of our dull mind, and the mind just being burdened with guilt, worry, remorse, and fear, agitation, doubts, and everything else. All of these things add to why sloth and torpor is still there. The ability, you can't concentrate, and being overtired. So there's some physical aspects are there, as well as the mental aspects contributing to sloth and torpor, But there's not one fetter that's connected directly to sloth and torpor, as I mentioned. Okay, so it looks like that's the end of the questions. So I think we'll end this this part of the program now. I hope it wasn't too confusing for you, but you know, oh, I forgot to mention the Visuddhimagga. If any of you have the Visuddhimagga, or you might be able to even look it up online, the Path of Purification. There's a couple of editions out, one by the Buddhist Publication Society in Kandy, Sri Lanka, and one I think was produced by Wisdom Publications, or that some Shogun Trungpa wrote a book, or anyway, it's Visuddhimagga in 2 parts, produced by, I don't know, maybe somebody can help me with that, some other publisher. But it's in the section of chapter 21 and 22 of Visuddhimagga. Maybe you can Google it and maybe it will come up. Okay, so the wisdom in which soil grows is where I got a lot of this information is given, and those similes and the connections and so on about conformity knowledge, change of lineage, and the 4 paths and fruits. A lot of it's very detailed, and it can be quite confusing, but that is, if you're interested to read more about it, you can, you know, if you can get a hold of those books and read it over again, then, you know, that may be interesting. I mean, the Visuddhimagga does have a lot of interesting things in it, especially about developing insight, meditation, and many nice little stories and similes given that you won't find in a lot of other books. So, okay, so now we're going to have a short break to use the bathroom or take a drink of water. And we'll come back in a couple of minutes and have a few stretches, and then we'll have our guided meditation. Okay, so I'm going to stop my video now and so I'm going to be starting the few stretching exercises now for meditation. Just stand straight, feel your feet pressing the floor. Relax the shoulders and arms at the sides. Then begin some deep, slow breathing, expanding the abdomen, middle rib cage, and upper chest. Hold the air in the lungs for for 2 or 3 seconds, and slowly let out the breath, feeling those relaxing contraction sensations. And these stretching exercises are done coordinated with that same deep, slow breathing. On the next in-breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back, arch your lower spine, and stretch upwards at the same time. On the out-breath, turn the palms down and touch the top of your head with the out-breath. Next in-breath, palms up, straighten the arms, head back, stretch up. Out-breath, touch the top of the head. And third time, hold that upward stretch longer. Arch the lower spine. Hold it. Now release your fingers, and on the out breath, arms back to the side and relax. Gently close the eyes, feel the feet pressing the ground. Don't give the mind time to wander. Just try to feel the increased pulsations or tingling sensations in your hands and fingers. Feel the clothing touching the skin. If you can't feel that, just remember standing, standing, the present moment of the body. Just letting your thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. On the next in-breath, push up on the toes while raising the arms up over the head like this and stretch up, facing the palms, the hands toward each other about 6 inches apart. On the out-breath, arms back to the side, heels to the floor. Use this breathing to help lift and lower the body, like the in-breath, like blowing up a helium balloon. The body lifts up. Stretch. Out. In. Out. Relax. And feel the sensations in the hands and fingers. Because of the increased blood, oxygenated blood in the movements, sending strong currents of blood and energy up and down the arms. Feel that aliveness of the body. Especially in the hands and fingers. Remember standing, standing. Next we'll do side bending using one arm at a time. So on an in-breath, raise your left arm up. Keep the fingers and arms straight, close to the head. On the out-breath, bend over your right side as far as you comfortably can. You keep the bicep touching your side of your head. In-breath, lift up. Again, out-breath to the right. In. Out. In. Out breath, lower the arm. Next in breath, raise the other arm. And 3 times, bending over the other side, out breath. In. Out. In. Out. In. The out breath, lower that arm. Just relax, close the eyes. Try to feel aliveness sensations in the inner body. Just remember standing. The sensations are just the material sensations, the material form, sensory vibration. They're producing the feelings. Some of those are pleasant feelings, painful feelings. Feelings are actually the sensations, but we relate to them as being, some are pleasant, some are painful, some are neutral. That's the actual feeling part. Okay, one last exercise, head turning. On an in-breath, turn your head to the right as far as you comfortably can. Look over your right shoulder. Hold it a few moments. On the out breath, turning the head 180 degrees back to the left. To look over the left shoulder. In breath back to the right. Out breath left. Once more to each side, in breath to the right. Out breath left. On the in-breath, let the head stop in the center. Just relax. Try to mentally feel the outline of the standing body. That sense of the feet pressing the floor underneath, the arms and hands at the sides, the head on top. Remember standing. Try to feel that aliveness of the standing body. The sensations are the material form. If there's any names or labels, like calling it my body or the arm or the head, that's perception. Or any urges to do something, the volition. And the consciousness. Is there any sense of I or me there in the consciousness? Okay, now go ahead and come back, take up your meditation posture. I'm going to be turning off my video now. So you keep your mind focused inside yourself. So just sit straight, sit up straight, aligning your head and spine in a straight line. And first of all, just feel the buttocks and feet pressing the floor, the seat. Feel that sensation of hardness, which is the earth vibration, earth element. That vibration of feeling hard, pressure. Just gonna mentally feel how the legs are crossed underneath. Or if you're sitting in a chair, the feet pressing the floor. And feel your hands and fingers. Try to feel the subtle pulsations, sensations left over from the yoga exercise, the hands and fingers. Where they touch each other, that's the earth vibration. Might be a neutral feeling or a pleasant feeling, or maybe an unpleasant feeling. And relax the shoulders. Feel the arms hanging down from the shoulders. Feel the clothing touching the skin of the shoulders and arms or chest. getting grounded, centered in the body, finding the laboratory door, the external body. Then feel the head balanced on top of the neck. Feel some sensations on your face, your lips touching together. Feel the nose. Any other sensations on your face or forehead? And feel the eyes and the sockets and the eyelid stretched over the eyeball. You better just rest the attention there, feeling the eyes. If there's any eye movements, just relax them. You might see some color or pattern. And from that point behind the eyes, just try to feel the larger outline of the body, that sense of the buttocks and feet underneath, hands and arms in the middle, the head on top. The sitting body. This is the laboratory. Or having reached the door of the laboratory. Then begin taking a few deep, slow breaths to gradually start opening the laboratory door. Feel the sensations of breathing. Like we are doing in the yoga, try to take several deep, slow breaths, expanding the abdomen, rib cage and upper chest. Hold the air in the lungs a few seconds to feel the subtle sensations, to feel that pause between the breaths, and feel the relaxing contractions of the out breath. Just take several deep, slow breaths like that, thinking along these lines to yourself. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Just gradually opening the door of the laboratory, the body, going inside. Now we're going to count the breaths from 1 to 10 to try to focus more precisely on the breathing process, to feel all the subtle sensations of expanding and contracting, and the pauses between the breaths. So if you can, if you're not tired, try to continue some more deep, slow breathing, maybe in a gentle way. The deliberate, deeper breathing helps you to stay concentrated. With the next in-breath, mentally count 1. Feel that pause. And with the contracting out breath, also count 1. One complete round of breathing. The next expanding in-breath, count 2. Feel the pause. And the contracting out breath, 2. Riding the contracting out breath all the way down to the end. Feel the last bit of air go out. Next in breath, 3. Out breath, 3. In breath, 4. Out breath, 4. In breath, 5. Out breath, 5. In breath, 6. Out breath, 6. In breath, 7. Out breath, 7. In breath, 8. Out breath, 8. In breath, 9. Out breath, 9. In breath, 10. Out breath, 10. And discontinue the countings, completely relax. Don't try to control the breathing any longer. Just let the breathing return to its more relaxed or uncontrolled rhythm. But continue to feel it. Stay focused there in the center of the body. Feel the residual, subtle or expanding and contracting movement in the abdomen or in the rib cage, stomach or rib cage. There's many different little sensations you can notice, or in the chest. Just simply know when you're breathing in and know when the breath is going out. The knowing is the awareness. And to feel or know the pause in between the breaths. After the in-breath, there's a brief pause, maybe a fraction of a second only, or longer. And after the out-breath, also a brief pause. It's important to try to notice those pauses too. Increases your concentration. Just breathing in, the pause. Breathing out, the pause. It's the 4 phases of the breath. The in-breath, the pause. The out-breath and the pause. So just like looking through a microscope or through a magnifying glass, just focus the attention. Sensations of breathing in and the pause. The out-breath and the pause. What you're feeling mostly is where the clothing rubs against the skin of your stomach, rib cage, your chest. Those subtle rubbing sensations of the clothing against the skin. That's probably what you will feel in the material form. Earth element of the flesh and rib cage rubbing against the earth element of the clothing. Produces friction, produces sensation. Produces perception. That contact produces feeling and perception. Maybe some thoughts about it. Volitional activity of the mind. And the sense of me that's meditating. All of those are the 5 aggregates. Just try to notice those while being focused on the breathing process. Just breathing in, the pause. Breathing out, the pause. Just breath by breath. Moment by moment. It's cultivating mindfulness and concentration. Being mindful for any hindrances. Like sloth and torpor, the chin is drooping down or the spine is slouching. Mindfulness recognizes that as slouching, slouching. Wisdom determines it's better to straighten up than the volition to straighten up. And returning again to the concentration. So the ability to follow the breathing process moment to moment is the concentration, kanika samadhi. The mindfulness is alert for any hindrances trying to come up, doubts. desires, restlessness, wondering what time it is. You have to be mindful of the hindrances in order to let go of them, adjust, come back to the concentration. That's how you develop mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Mindfulness is alert for the hindrance. The wisdom understands the hindrance, how to correct it. And the concentration comes back to the breathing and repeats itself over and over till mindfulness and wisdom make the distractions less and less. The concentration gets deeper and deeper. So just continue working with that. Developing this anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. With each out breath, just try to feel the mind and body relaxing more and more into the present moment. The pauses between the breaths might even become longer. Just feel the tranquility in that pause. Feel the subtle vibrations of the sitting body during that pause. Even while feeling the breathing process, you can notice other sensations coming and going, arising and vanishing in different places. Some itch or prickling sensation. Body movement. If there's any sounds where you are arising and vanishing, the sound vibration, even the sound of this voice. It arises, lasts a second, stops. Is the mind still holding on to it? Be alert for random thoughts. arising in the mind, urge, an idea, memory. It's just thinking. It's the mind bubble. If you don't pay attention to it, it vanishes. Leaving awareness in the present moment with the body. The mind is calm enough and tuning in to that flow of impermanent body sensation, sound, thought, body sensation, thought, sound, body sensation, rapidly coming and going. Try to identify the aggregate material vibration. This is form. This is feeling, producing a feeling. This gives rise to perception, thought, sense of me. So if there's too many hindrances or too many thoughts, go back to counting the breaths from 1 to 10, or take some deep, slow breaths to help slow the thinking mind down, get reconnected, grounded in the body, present moment. Or if mindfulness and concentration are well balanced, speeding up the rate of perception, and notice more and more moments of sensory stimulation arising and vanishing. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. That ongoing connection to the present moment awareness. Thoughts come and go. Sensations come and go. Thoughts, urges come and go. This is all just a constant stream of the impermanent world, arising and vanishing through the senses, through the sixfold sense sphere. Without clinging to them, dragging in the past or future. Just let the mind float on the wave of impermanence from moment to moment. Kanaka Samadhi. It's riding the wave of impermanence, arising and vanishing, but without getting stuck, without getting pulled under the surface. Just experience that ease, freedom. Just awareness kind of floating like a beach ball with the waves up and down. Watch out for the sharks nibbling the toes, the hindrances trying to drag your mind underneath. Your agitation, worry, fear, greed or hatred, or sleepiness. Take a deep breath, float back up to the surface. Moment to moment. See the disadvantages of ignorant clinging to the various sense objects, and the advantage of letting go. Sabbi sankhara aniccati Yada panyaya pasati atanibindati dukhi Isamagu visuddhiya Nati janam apanyacha Panyanati ajaito Yam hi janancha panyacha Siri nibbana santiki. All the conditioned things, the five aggregates of this body, mind, and world are impermanent, in a constant state of flux and change, arising and vanishing. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to freedom, to conformity and change of lineage. And there's no meditation without wisdom, no wisdom without meditation. One who both concentrates and is wise is close to peace and freedom. Standing on the path. Again, to close this meditation, let's send out some thoughts of thought vibrations of metta, combining it with some deep, slow breathing, sending metta to our own body and mind. So just take a few deep, slow breaths. After breathing in, hold the air in the lungs for as long as you comfortably can to feel those subtle vibrations, or imagine that oxygenating blood going out to permeate and saturate all the cells of the body, mind, nervous system. On the out breath, feel that relaxing, pleasant, relaxing sensation back into the present moment. Just take a few more deep, slow breaths like that. Just imagine that being a healing vibration, helping to loosen up the soil around the roots, the fetters, deep in the unconscious. Just thinking along these lines. May I be well, peaceful, mindful, and wise. May I be free from excessive attachment and greed, anger or hatred, jealousy, envy, fear, pride, and ignorance. May I be free from the pain, sorrow, and sufferings of body and mind, brought about by such unskillful thought, speech, and actions. May I have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May I be able to continue to deepen my understanding of the Dhamma, and the practice of meditation, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. to overcome confusion and suffering. May I be well, peaceful, and wise. Now, in a more general sense, if you can, continue to take some deep, slow breaths, and with each out breath, imagine that out breath as the metta vibrations, peaceful vibrations of pure love, pure energy, pure wisdom, going outward across the hills and valleys, through the towns and cities. You can send more of that to places that are having, riots and violence. Other places, or to your own loved ones who are suffering in different ways, or just in a general sense with each out breath. Imagine these waves of metta vibrations going out across the whole earth, across the oceans, continents, surrounding the whole earth. These vibrations of pure love, pure wisdom, pure energy, which is pure awareness. Just with the idea that may all living beings, wherever they might be, living near or far, weak or the strong, rich or poor, may all living beings be well, peaceful, mindful, and happy. May all beings be free from various sufferings of body and mind brought about by their unskillful thought, speech, and action. May all beings be able to hear the Dhamma and cultivate mindfulness, patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May all beings be able to hear the teachings of the Dhamma and gradually purify their minds from the hindrances and fetters. May all beings be able to live peacefully and harmoniously together, understanding the ultimate interconnectedness and interdependence of all things. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. Just like a mantra reverberating throughout space, or the sound of the wisdom bell, driving out the cobwebs of ignorance. May all beings be well, peaceful, and wise. And for those who know the little chant, you can chant with me the brief metta chant. Dukkha pata ca nidukkha, bhaya pata ca nibbaya, soka pata ca nisoka, hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. In this way may all beings live with mindfulness and wisdom. And thus spoke the Buddha, the awakened. Again, if you like, you can join in chanting the sadhu 3 times on the out breath. Sadhu. 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 Okay, friends. So this brings our Sunday afternoon
Thank you, Bhante.
to an end. You're all very welcome. And this Wednesday evening in the Sutta class, I'll be going over the Anapanasati Sutta.